They say weddings bring families together. That's a lie. Sometimes weddings show you just how far apart you've always been. How blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and how love, when wrapped in obligation, becomes a cage. My name is Claire Bennett, and I didn't see the betrayal coming. At least, not until I saw the photos. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back, not to the moment everything fell apart, but to the moment I thought everything was coming together. I was 29 when Ethan proposed. It happened on a breezy spring evening in a tiny Italian restaurant tucked into a side street in downtown Asheville. He was nervous. I could tell from the way he kept adjusting his collar and dropping his fork. But when he slid the ring box across the table with trembling hands and whispered, "Claire, will you marry me?" Forgot how to breathe. Not because I wasn't expecting it. We'd been together 4 years, lived together for 2. But because in that one moment, the years of doubt I'd buried under patience suddenly felt validated. He chose me. Finally. I said yes. Through tears. Through laughter. Through every memory of waiting. What I didn't realize was that I was the only one truly celebrating. My parents, Susan and Richard Bennett, were civil. That's the best word I can use. When I told them over brunch the following week, their reactions were crisp, practiced. "Oh, that's nice," Mom said, patting her napkin into her lap. "Good for you," Dad added, sipping his black coffee with unreadable eyes. I waited for more. For excitement. For joy. It didn't come. My younger sister, Melissa, let out a single laugh. "Wow. Finally locked him down, huh?" She smiled when she said it. But her eyes didn't. That comment should have been my first red flag. But I brushed it off the way I always had with Melissa. She was the golden one. The favorite. The one who graduated top of her class, who landed the Ivy League job, who brought home polished boyfriends and wore designer coats in the middle of July. I was the artist. The one who went to school for design, worked freelance, and had a cluttered apartment full of mood boards and half-sketched dresses. I thought they respected the difference. Turns out they tolerated it. Until the wedding gave them an excuse not to. The planning started slow like a trickle from a leaking faucet you think you can ignore. We set the date for September. I wanted something elegant but simple. A garden wedding in the same botanical conservatory where Ethan and I had our second date. "We'll keep it small," I told my family over dinner. "Just under 100 guests. Close friends. Immediate family." Mom raised an eyebrow. "What about your father's partners? The ones who've known you since you were in diapers?" Dad cleared his throat. "They'll expect to be invited, Claire." I blinked. "It's not a business event. It's my wedding." Melissa chimed in. "You can't not invite them. People will talk." People will talk. I heard those words 100 times over the next 3 months. When I picked the venue. People will talk if it's not in a church. When I chose a muted rose palette instead of stark white. People will talk. It's too unconventional. When I said I'd write my own vows. People will talk. But no one asked what I wanted. No one except Ethan. "Do you want to elope?" he asked one night, half joking, as we sat on the living room floor surrounded by invitation mock-ups. I smiled, but there was an edge to it. Wouldn't they love that? He didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. My family didn't care about what made me happy. They cared about what made them look good. And yet, I still tried. The dress was my one rebellion. I designed it myself, months before Ethan even proposed, if I'm being honest. A flowing silhouette, soft lace sleeves, a low back. Understated. Dreamy. Not flashy. I brought my sketchbook to the bridal boutique and worked with a tailor who helped me bring it to life. I didn't bring my mother. She had made it clear during our first shopping trip. "You really think that cut flatters your figure?" I never invited her again. Melissa called me selfish. "Mom's been dreaming about your wedding since you were 12, she said on the phone. "Well, then maybe she should marry me." Melissa didn't laugh. 6 weeks before the wedding, my parents asked to host a pre-celebration dinner. "It's just close family," Mom said. "No stress, no expectations." I hesitated, but Ethan encouraged it. Maybe it's their way of trying. So we went. The dinner was held at a country club I had never been allowed into growing up. Melissa greeted us in a pale blue cocktail dress that looked like it cost more than our entire flower budget. There were over 30 people there, including extended family, colleagues of my father's, and old family friends I barely remembered. No one mentioned the wedding. No one asked about the venue or the dress or the date. Instead, they spent the evening doting on Melissa, asking about her job, her recent vacation to Prague, her new boyfriend. I felt like a guest at my own engagement dinner. When we left, Mom kissed my cheek and whispered, "Don't wear anything too low-cut on the big day. Remember, modesty is timeless." I cried in the car. Ethan held my hand in silence. The final blow, the one that should have told me something was off, came during the rehearsal dinner. My parents didn't show up. No call. No message. Nothing. Melissa texted me 20 minutes after it started. "They're not feeling well. Just do your thing." It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. But it was. Because this wasn't about stomachaches or busy schedules. It was about a choice. And they chose not to show up. Still, I got married. On a golden September afternoon, beneath an arch of white peonies and eucalyptus leaves, Ethan and I exchanged vows we wrote by hand. My maid of honor cried. The officiant stumbled over Ethan's last name. The ring nearly fell. It was perfect. Even without them. Especially without them. 2 weeks later, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't seen in years. "So sorry I missed the celebration. Everything looked stunning. Melissa was glowing." I blinked. "Melissa?" I responded. "You mean the wedding?" He replied. "No, the one last weekend at the Riverstone Club. I thought it was your real ceremony." I stared at my phone. No, it couldn't be. He sent photos. And there they were. My parents. Melissa. Dressed in a floor-length white gown. Standing under a flower arch. Almost identical to mine. Guests in cocktail attire. Champagne flutes raised. A banner behind them read, "A celebration of family and commitment." Melissa stood in the center. Like a bride. My mother beside her. My father beaming. No mention of me.
No invitasten. No explanasten.
No place. That was the moment everything cracked. Not just my trust, but my identity. Because it wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the truth that had been building for years. Quiet, poisonous, and denied. They never wanted me to shine. They never wanted me to be first. They wanted someone they could mold. Control. Present. And I had gone off script. I married a man they didn't pick. Planned a wedding they didn't control. Built a life they didn't design. So they made their own version. One where I didn't exist. The human brain is funny. It can ignore years of slights. It can bury comments, rationalize cold shoulders, reinterpret silence as patience. But it can't ignore proof. And there it was, a digital gallery of betrayal, curated like a fairy tale I had no part in. I stared at the photo on my phone. My sister Melissa, glowing in white. Our parents on either side like proud guardians of her purity and perfection. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't a family reunion. It was a ceremony. A fabricated celebration. A second wedding, or maybe their real one, with Melissa playing the stand-in for the daughter they wanted. My hands trembled. "Claire." Ethan's voice cut through the storm. "What's wrong?" I turned the screen to him, my lips parting but no words forming. He studied it for a moment, eyebrows knitting. "Wait, is that your mom?" I nodded. "And Melissa? What is this?" I laughed short, bitter. "That's what I'd like to know." Ethan tried to calm me. He brought me tea. He rubbed my shoulders. He sat beside me, quiet and solid. But there was nothing to fix. Nothing to patch. You don't patch a knife in the back. You pull it out. The next day I called my mother. She didn't answer. I called my father. Voicemail. I texted Melissa. Saw the photos. "Hope it was everything you dreamed of." Her reply was fast, too fast. "Claire, it wasn't what it looked like. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I packed a bag and drove to their house. They lived in a gated community on the nicer side of town. Polished driveways, trimmed hedges, the kind of neighborhood where every house had matching mailboxes. As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed the white balloons still tied to their porch railing. A few had deflated. One hung limply by a thread, like the lie it represented. I knocked. Mom opened the door like she'd been expecting me. She didn't look surprised. Or sorry. Claire. Mom. We stood there quiet. Then come in. The house smelled like vanilla candles and floral arrangements. There were still remnants of the event. Wine glasses in the sink, folded napkins on the counter, a stack of unused programs on the side table. I picked one up. At the top in gold script. A commitment to legacy, honoring family, preserving tradition. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Mom poured coffee like we were strangers having brunch. So, I said finally, sitting stiffly at the table. Want to tell me what that was? She sighed, placing the mug in front of me like she was doing me a favor. It wasn't a wedding. Not officially. No. Then what was it exactly? It was a celebration. For the family. For Melissa. For everything we've built. I stared. We. She sat down, folded her hands neatly. Claire, you chose to go your own way. You made decisions without including us. You planned a wedding that didn't reflect who we are. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. So you threw another one? She didn't blink. We needed something respectable. There it was. Respectable. That word again. The one they wielded like a knife. What exactly was disrespectful about my wedding? You wore an open-back dress. You had that female officiant. You didn't even have a proper reception. I stood. So instead of talking to me, you staged some bizarre family PR stunt and pretended I didn't exist? She looked away. You've always been difficult, Claire. That line. That damn line. It followed me through childhood. When I wore boots instead of ballet flats, difficult. When I chose art school over law, difficult. When I dated someone who didn't come from money, difficult. I leaned in, voice low. You didn't just exclude me. You replaced me. It wasn't about that. Then what was it about? A pause. Then she said it. Cold. Measured. You embarrassed us. The words hit harder than any slap could have. I left without finishing the coffee. Without saying goodbye. As I reached the door, she called after me. You always wanted to be different. Now you are. Congratulations. Back home, I collapsed into Ethan's arms. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't offer platitudes. He just held me while I shook. I didn't speak to my parents for 2 months. Melissa tried at first. Voicemails. Emails. One long text explaining how she didn't know they'd go so far. That she was just helping Mom plan something small. And it spiraled. I didn't believe her. Because Melissa always knew how to sidestep consequences. And this was no accident. She stood there in white. Under a flower arch, giving toasts and smiling beside our parents as if nothing was wrong. She chose the spotlight they offered. And I would never forget it. But silence, like grief, has stages. Eventually I started speaking again. Not to them. But about them. I opened up to my friends. Told them the truth. I wrote it in my journal, in blog posts, even in drafts of letters I never intended to send. And then something strange happened. I began to feel lighter. Not healed. Not whole. But stronger. Because saying the truth out loud took the shame out of it. I hadn't done anything wrong. They had. And if anyone should feel embarrassed, it wasn't the daughter who wore a backless dress. It was the parents who hosted a fake wedding to protect their image. 3 months later I got a letter. A real one. In the mail. From my father. Claire. I don't know how to begin. Your mother says I'm not good with feelings, and maybe she's right. But I've been reading your posts. You're right. We hurt you. And that celebration, it was wrong. I won't make excuses. But I want you to know I see you now. I don't know how to fix this. But I'd like to try. If you'll let me. Dad. I read the letter 4 times. It wasn't everything. But it was something. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I placed the letter in a wooden box beside my wedding vows. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. That sometimes, healing doesn't mean returning. Sometimes it just means rebuilding yourself without the rot. The letter stayed in the wooden box for a month. I told myself I needed time to process it, but the truth was simpler. I didn't trust myself not to read between the lines. My father had written words of regret, but no apology. There was grief in the ink, yes, but no accountability. Ethan asked one evening while we folded laundry, "Are you going to write back?" I stared at the pile of towels neatly squared. a contrast to the knots in my stomach. I don't know. I'm not ready. He didn't press. And that was the beautiful thing about Ethan. He never tried to rush my healing. He understood that wounds don't close just because the bleeding stops. By spring, life had taken on a strange sort of peace. I threw myself into design projects, took on a few bridal clients of my own, irony not lost on me. I helped plan my friend Nina's wedding, laughing over florals and fabric samples, avoiding all talk of my own family. But the memories crept in anyway. Sometimes in the grocery aisle, when I saw a mother and daughter arguing over cake mixes. Sometimes during client meetings, when a mother gushed over her daughter's gown like it was their dream. And most painfully during holidays, because no matter how much I told myself I didn't need them, the silence from my parents' side of the table still echoed. Then Melissa called. I almost didn't answer. But some traitorous part of me still believed she might say the one thing I'd waited months to hear. I'm sorry. Instead, her voice came through the phone, polished and upbeat. Hey Claire. I was wondering if we could talk. In person. I hesitated. Why? I want to clear the air. Please. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near the college campus. The place we used to visit before everything between us hardened. Melissa looked perfect as always. Sleek ponytail, crisp blazer, polished nails. Her phone was already face down on the table, signaling she wanted me to know I had her attention. But it felt calculated. I ordered you a chai, she said with a smile. Extra cinnamon. I raised an eyebrow. You remember that? Her smile dimmed. Of course I do. We sat in silence for a moment, the distance between us louder than any words. Finally she spoke. I want to start by saying I didn't mean for that event to hurt you. That wasn't just an event, Melissa. That was a staged alternative wedding. Her eyes flinched barely. I didn't realize what Mom was planning until it was too late. She kept saying it was just a family brunch, that it was about honoring tradition. And you didn't think it was weird when she had you wear a white gown. She faltered. Okay, that part. I should have said no. You should have said more than no. You should have walked out. Melissa looked down. I didn't know how. And I still don't know why, I said. Why did you go along with it? Why didn't you tell me what they were doing? She swallowed hard. Because for once, I felt like I was doing what they wanted, and they weren't disappointed. That hit like a punch. Because it was honest. And because I knew that feeling. Claire, she said, voice trembling slightly, I've always been the one who got it right, but that meant I never got to be real. I had to be perfect all the time. And when Mom asked me to help plan something for Family Pride, I told myself it was harmless. That you wouldn't care. That you'd already had your wedding. I shook my head, staring at her. You let them erase me. Her eyes filled. I did. And I hate that. I've been carrying it ever since. That surprised me. Because Melissa never cried. Why now? I asked. Why talk to me now? Because I saw your blog post. The one about boundaries and broken traditions. So she had read it. I realized, she said softly, you've been fighting alone. And maybe I'm ready to start fighting with you. If you'll let me. I didn't forgive her that day. But I let her finish her tea. And that was something. Later that night I told Ethan about the meeting. He listened without interrupting, then said, Do you think she means it? I think she wants to mean it. He nodded. That's a start. We sat in bed, our fingers entwined. Do you want them back in your life? He asked gently. I didn't answer right away. 'Cause I didn't know. A week later my dad texted. Dinner. Just you and me? Neutral ground. My treat. I didn't respond. Instead I showed up. He was already at the table when I arrived, hair grayer, shoulders a bit more hunched, but still wearing the same navy blazer he wore to every formal event since 1995. He stood as I approached. Claire. Dad. The waiter took our drink orders. The moment he walked away, my father exhaled. I'm not going to pretend this isn't awkward. Then don't. He nodded. Fair. Silence. Then. I want to explain. I don't need an explanation. I need the truth. He looked me in the eye. Your mother wanted control. And I let her take it. I thought if I stayed quiet I could keep the peace. And what did it cost you? He blinked. You. We sat with that for a while. I read your letter, I said. But I didn't respond. Because words are easy. What I needed was this. I'm here now, he said. Are you? I think I finally am. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A photo. From my wedding. Me and Ethan, hand in hand, petals in the air. I keep this in my wallet, he said. Because I need to remember what love looks like when it's not rehearsed. I left dinner without hugging him. But I didn't walk away angry. Something had shifted. Not healed. But shifted. 2 months later my mother emailed me. Just a few lines. Claire. There's a strange peace that comes with choosing distance. Doesn't look like screaming. Doesn't feel like revenge. Feels like quiet. Like a door closing softly. After my father's letter and Melissa's half apology over chai lattes, life didn't shift in dramatic ways. No grand reconciliation.
No emotional fireworks.
But the tension loosened a little. I still didn't speak to my mother. Not because I hated her. But because I no longer needed her permission to feel whole. And once I stopped needing her, I stopped chasing her. I poured myself into my bridal studio. The irony never got old. Designing wedding gowns while mine had almost torn my family apart. But every stitch became healing. When I helped brides pick satin over tulle, or cried happy tears as they saw themselves in the mirror, I felt like I was giving them what I never had. A family that celebrated them without conditions. One day, a bride named Hannah brought her mother and grandmother to her first fitting. 3 generations. 3 versions of love. They all disagreed on neckline, veil, hemline, but they laughed as they fought. They hugged. They compromised. I stood quietly, pretending to be focused on pinning the bodice. But inside I was trying not to cry, because I'd never had that. And yet, somehow, I was giving it to someone else. That, I decided, was purpose. Ethan and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary quietly. A dinner at our favorite hole-in-the-wall Mexican place, followed by a walk through the park where we used to talk about someday. It was simple. Intimate. Ours. No photos for social media.
No curated perfection.
Just 2 people who chose each other and kept choosing even when the world fell short. After dinner we lay on the grass, staring up at the stars. I've been thinking, Ethan said. Dangerous, I teased. He smiled. What if we moved? Not far. Just somewhere new. A fresh start. I turned to him. You'd really leave? You left your family to build something better. Maybe it's time we do the same for us. I didn't need time to think. Yes, I said. We found a small cottage on the edge of town, near the lake, with an ivy-wrapped fence and enough space for a studio and a garden. It needed work, but so did we. And that was perfect. We moved in early autumn. By winter, the fireplace worked. The walls were painted warm earth tones. And I transformed the sunroom into a design space that made my heart beat faster every time I entered. Ethan planted tulips in the backyard. He said they reminded him of our wedding bouquet, the one I chose without asking anyone's opinion. Freedom smells like paint and fresh soil. Then came the email. Subject line. Melissa plus Graham. Save the date. My stomach dropped. I opened it. There she was, my sister, smiling in a flowing ivory dress beside a man I'd never met. The email read, "We're finally tying the knot. Join us for a weekend celebration of love, family, and tradition." I stared at those last words. Family and tradition. There it was again, the script I'd been written out of. I waited for the sting, for the ache, for the anger. But none came. Only clarity. I wasn't going. Not because I was bitter, but because I had nothing left to prove. 2 days later Melissa called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or perhaps closure, won. "Claire," she said, breathless, like she expected a fight. "I saw the invite," I said. Silence. Then, "I want you there." "Why?" "Because," her voice cracked, "you're my sister. And because you were right. About all of it." I stayed silent. I'm marrying a man who sees me, not as a role to fill, but a person. Just like Ethan does for you. And it made me realize how badly we all failed you. I closed my eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive Mom," she continued. "But I'm asking if you can show up. For me, that caught me off guard. Because this wasn't a demand, it was a request. I'll think about it, I said. And for the first time, that wasn't a power move. It was the truth. That night I told Ethan. Would you go? I asked. He hesitated. If it were my brother, and he meant it? Maybe. He sat beside me. But only if I could go as me. Not as a performance. I nodded. Exactly. So I called Melissa the next morning. I'll come, I said. But I'm not bringing Mom flowers. I'm not hugging people who pretended I didn't exist. I'm there for you. That's all I want, she whispered. The wedding was beautiful. Set in a vineyard, golden sun, soft strings playing in the background. Melissa walked down the aisle barefoot, something she'd once mocked me for wanting, and I smiled. Her vows were shaky but heartfelt. Her groom, Graham, looked at her like she was made of light. And for a fleeting second, I saw the version of her that once shared bunk beds with me, whispered secrets, stole my nail polish. After the ceremony, she found me near the arbor. You look happy, she said. I am, I replied. She reached out, took my hand. I'm sorry. And this time I believed her. I didn't speak to my mother at the wedding. She didn't speak to me. She hovered near the buffet, holding a champagne glass like it was armor. I caught her glance once, unreadable. I didn't go over. And I didn't regret it. Because forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Sometimes it's just release. 3 months later, I was in my studio when I got a package. No name. No return address. Inside a faded photo. Me age 8, in a crooked tiara and a paper veil, standing on the front steps of our childhood home. My mother's handwriting on the back. She always wanted her own kind of fairy tale. No letter. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it next to my design board. Not as a memory of who I lost, but as proof of who I'd become. Spring arrived earlier than expected. The tulips Ethan planted last fall bloomed like they had been waiting for the permission to begin again. And in some strange poetic way, so had I. It had been over a year since my wedding. Nearly a year since my family tried to erase it. And yet, there I was, in our sun-filled cottage with bare feet, ink-stained hands, and a studio full of dresses that reflected everything I used to be afraid to claim. Softness, confidence, imperfection, joy. Some wounds never fully disappear. But some become part of your skin, and you learn how to live in it anyway. One morning while sketching, my phone lit up with a familiar name. Susan Bennett. I froze. The last time my mother called me directly was the night before my wedding. A conversation that ended with, "Don't expect us to support something you've already ruined." I didn't pick up. But I didn't delete it either. Instead, I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later I played it. Claire. It's me. I don't expect anything. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted to tell you I saw your latest bridal collection in the magazine. It was stunning. You've built something beautiful. On your own terms. And I was wrong to make you feel like that wasn't enough. I hope one day, if not as mother and daughter, then maybe as two women, we can find a way to speak again. Click. I listened again. And again. Each time the bitterness in my chest softened. Not into forgiveness. Not yet. But into understanding. She had needed control because it was the only thing she ever believed gave her value. And I had shattered that illusion when I stopped asking for her approval. I didn't call her back. But I did write something for myself. A letter I never sent. Dear Mom, I used to think your silence meant I had to be smaller to earn your love. That if I could just dress right, speak softer, plan better, you would see me. But now I know your love came with conditions. Mine never will. So I'm building a life where love looks like open doors, not tests I have to pass. Where I raise a daughter someday, maybe, who knows, she's enough simply because she is. You don't have to say anything else. I've said what matters. Goodbye. Claire. One evening as Ethan and I watched the sun sink behind the lake, he reached over and squeezed my hand. You ever think, he said softly, that maybe you had to lose them to become you? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I didn't have to lose them. They just didn't want to come with me. He nodded. And somehow that made it easier. Months passed. I launched a new line of dresses called Unwritten Vows. Each gown told a story. Not the fairy tale, but the real one. Brides cried in them. laughed in them, took ownership of them, just like I had learned to do with my life. I became the woman I once hoped my mother would help me become, and when she didn't, I became her anyway. And that was the most powerful revenge of all. Not bitterness, not revenge, but becoming. One day, as I stood in the studio arranging lace samples, the bell over the door rang. A young woman entered, tentative, carrying a folder of her own sketches. "Hi," she said nervously. I don't know if you take interns, but I love your work. And I want to learn from someone who isn't afraid to break rules." I smiled. "What's your name?" She grinned. "Natalie. Natalie Bennett." I blinked. She laughed. "Yeah, weird coincidence. I'm not related to those Bennetts, I promise." I laughed too. "Even if you were, that wouldn't stop me." And just like that, the world had a sense of humor again. That night, I opened my wooden box. Inside, my father's letter, the photo my mother sent, my original wedding vows, a blank card, addressed only to, for who I needed to be. I lit a candle. One by one I burned the papers, not out of anger, but to release them, because the only ceremony that ever mattered was the one where I married myself back to who I was always meant to be.